Hey guys, tonight we dive into the rolling green hills of ancient Thessaly, where sheep bleat, shepherds nap under fig trees, and the god of the sun, you, just got hired to herd livestock. Spoiler alert, it goes downhill faster than a goat on roller skates. Your sandals crunch softly over dry grass as you step into the pasture, bright as a torch and twice as enthusiastic. Golden curls bouncing, your kite and wrinkle-free. You're probably the first celestial being to ever show up early for manual labor. But there's a problem. Actually, several. Your first issue? You're radiating literal sunlight. As in, the sheep can't look at you without squinting. And a bale of hay just spontaneously combusted behind you. The local shepherds squint through their linen head wraps and mutter prayers under their breath. Not in awe, more in a, "Dear gods, not again," kind of way. Apparently, when the regional deity of fire and prophecy applies for a rustic job that pays in feta cheese and olive oil, things get weird fast. You tug at your borrowed wool cloak. It itches. The sheep, to their credit, try to ignore you. One brave ewe approaches with curiosity, then immediately faints. The scent of burning grass wafts around as your divine aura quietly singes a patch of field. You try stepping into the shade, but there's a problem. You are the shade destroyer. No shadow survives you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, because, trust me, this tale works best just before sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been hired by Demetrios, a leathery, sun-worn farmer who thinks Apollo is just an old family name. He doesn't suspect you're the Apollo, Olympian, slayer of Python, and part-time liar virtuoso. You like that? A fresh start. No temples. No celestial duties. Just sheep and sun and silence. Except, well, silence isn't really your thing. On your first day, you accidentally outshine the actual sun. Birds oversleep. Roosters spiral into an identity crisis. Brutus, the goat with surprisingly human eyes, starts butting everything that casts a shadow. You try to help. You really do. You remember that sunlight can also nourish. So you attempt to dial it down. Instead, you bleach half the pasture to a crispy beige and permanently bronze one of the donkeys. He looks good, though, very influencer chic. Demetrios eyes you suspiciously. You glow, he mutters, as if it's a character flaw. You smile. Just well hydrated, you say. Then your halo flickers slightly. Smooth. A few hours later, you sit on a stone, hoping the ground will stop hissing where you stepped. A child runs by and gasps. Mama! The new shepherd's on fire! You wave. No worries, I'm just naturally radiant. They throw a bucket of well water on you anyway. It evaporates before it lands. Still, you get a lunch break. You perch on a hillside, trying to blend in. But bees swarm you, mistaking your scent for ambrosia. A shepherdess blushes when you ask where to find fresh figs, and her brother glares hard enough to dent your divine ego. And when you whistle for the sheep to return, thunder echoes. Not metaphorical thunder. Real, Zeus-grade thunder. You forgot, your whistle summoned solar winds. Historians still argue whether this was a simple overuse of power or an early sign of sunstroke-induced delusion. Either way, you spend the next 20 minutes herding scattered sheep with apologetic fireflies. At sunset you sigh. You try to let go of the day's chaos. You strum your lyre once softly. The note hovers, warm and golden. But the sheep freeze. Then flee. Turns out they associate your music with natural disasters, thanks to a past misfire during a minor plague situation in Corinth. You glance up. A hawk circles, watching. It's the third bird today to do that. Are they forming some kind of avian union? You lie back in the grass. You smell like sun-toasted thyme and faint embarrassment. You came here for peace. Simplicity. A little dirt under the fingernails. But already, you suspect something isn't quite sustainable. And back in Olympus? The other gods are placing bets. Hermes, snickering, set the over-under at 3 weeks. Dionysus bet one day. Athena declined to wager. She said it's unethical to gamble on inevitable disaster. But you? You're still optimistic. You can learn this. Herding can't be that hard, right? Just guide, protect, and keep the sheep alive. Though maybe, just maybe, try not to set the barn on fire tomorrow. You wake early, though to be honest, you never really sleep. Gods like you drift, not in dreams, but in solar pulses and starlit thought loops. Still, as far as mortals are concerned, you're up before the rooster. Which, given yesterday's rooster-related crisis, is probably for the best. That bird hasn't crowed since it looked directly at you and entered a brief, feathered existential meltdown. Your morning begins with an attempt to carry the water bucket. You grip the handle, trying your best not to let any solar energy leak. But the metal heats up instantly and warps in your hand, sloshing the water all over your feet, which then immediately dry in a hiss of steam. You're pretty sure the bucket is now partially welded to your divine skin. Demetrios watches from the barn door, chewing something suspiciously brown and leafy. You good? He asks, one eyebrow lifted like a weathered bird wing. Better than the bucket, you mutter, shaking the thing loose and watching it roll away, still steaming. You decide to stick to shepherd's staff duties. That seems safer. You grab the crooked stick from the wall, give it a casual twirl, and accidentally split a fence post in half with a sonic crack. The post sizzles. Brutus the goat flees in terror. The sheep scatter like popped popcorn. You stare at the staff in your hand. Okay, you whisper. Maybe no twirls before breakfast. Demetrios groans, already stomping toward the damaged fence. You offer to fix it, but last time you tried to fix something, it turned into gold. It was a nice gate, though. Just, impractically heavy. You decide instead to gather the flock. You hike up a gentle slope, your glow thankfully muted under a wide straw hat that a passing child tossed you, after mumbling something about blinding the tomatoes. The sheep are hesitant. They recognize you now. You're the one who emits panic and vitamin D in equal measure. So you move slow, speaking softly. You murmur old pastoral hymns, though a few of them accidentally summon solar flares on the horizon. One you glares at you so hard it could rival Hera's worst moods. Mainstream history likes to paint Apollo as elegant and unflappable. But no scroll or statue ever shows you stepping in manure while trying to coax a sheep named Wiggles out from under a lemon tree. The sheep knows. Wiggles senses your confusion, your insecurity, and perhaps your immortal need for approval. And she uses it to her full advantage. Come on, now, you plead. Let's not make this a divine standoff. She stares. Then bolts. You chase her for what feels like hours. During that time, you trip over a bucket, not yours this time, startle a beehive, and end up with several bees orbiting your head like angry satellites. You finally catch Wiggles, who, incidentally, leads you to an unguarded patch of ripened figs. So, maybe a little divine guidance was involved after all? Back at the pasture, you attempt a head count. 8 sheep, 2 goats, 3 cows, and 1 surprisingly judgmental donkey. You count again. The donkey stares harder. It's unnerving. You kneel beside a young lamb that seems overheated. Carefully, gently, you place a hand on its woolly side and whisper a cooling chant you once used in a drought-stricken village. The lamb relaxes immediately, sighing, nuzzling into your lap. You smile. It worked. That's when a voice from the barn yells, "Hey! No magic, we're trying to raise normal sheep." You freeze. Slowly, guiltily, you lift your hands like you're under arrest. The lamb bleats in protest. Fringe scholars still debate whether rural shepherds of the classical period understood divine healing, or if they just thought it was some suspicious new city trick. Either way, you tuck your hands under your cloak and promise to be less magical. Which is a bit like asking Poseidon not to splash. Lunch rolls around, and this time, you wisely avoid touching anything metallic. You sit under a tree with a few of the shepherds. One offers you bread, olives, and cheese. You nod, accept, and try not to summon a celestial harvest. Still, the olives glow faintly. You're not sure if anyone notices. You listen quietly as the others talk about crop rotations, a merchant who keeps losing donkeys, and someone's cousin who claims to have seen a dryad in the wheat. You nod along, pretending you haven't dated that dryad. Twice. As you're biting into your cheese, someone asks, "So, where'd you say you're from again?" You freeze. "Oh, around." They nod slowly. "You one of them temple boys?" You shrug. "You could say I've spent time near altars." Someone snorts. "Figures. You walk like you think the ground should thank you." You smile. "Well, I am good for agriculture." They laugh. You laugh. The goat snorts. For a moment, everything feels oddly normal. But as you lean back and exhale, you accidentally radiate just a little too hard. The nearby fence post ignites. You're only 3 days in, and already your herding career is drawing attention from places you didn't expect, namely, Mount Olympus. Word travels fast up there, especially when it's carried by gossiping doves and nymphs with nothing better to do. Even Hermes popped in during the night, mid-dream, mid-snack, wearing socks with sandals, to whisper, "Heard you're feeding sheep sunlight." Bold strategy. So today, you decide to step up your mortal game and blend in better. You pack your own lunch, mortal style. No magical figs. No shimmering nectar. Just bread, a hunk of slightly squashed cheese, and because you couldn't resist, a single pomegranate from your personal grove. It hums faintly, which isn't ideal for blending in, but you figure wrapping it in a napkin will muffle the divine energy. As you walk toward your lunch spot, Brutus the goat gives you side-eye again. That goat holds grudges like Poseidon holds tridents. He hasn't forgiven you for accidentally warming the entire barn loft into a Turkish sauna on your second night. You settle under an olive tree on the hillside. The wind is warm, the sheep are nibbling contentedly, and your pomegranate is only glowing a little. Then, as you begin peeling it, a deep chord reverberates across the field. The olives start singing. Not a metaphor. The actual olives. They're swaying and harmonizing in soft, syrupy tones. You blink. Did you eat something weird? You didn't. It's the pomegranate. One fallen seed rolls into the grass, splits open, and starts pulsing light like a tiny fruit-sized disco ball. The olives respond, launching into what can only be described as a folk anthem in D minor. You try to smother the nearest olive with a leaf. "Sure!" It sings louder. In Latin. A cow lifts its head, chewing thoughtfully, as if reviewing the song's melodic structure. You glance toward the other shepherds. No one seems to have noticed. Not yet. But the singing olives are attracting bees, and the bees are beginning to buzz in rhythm. And now the grass is swaying unnaturally, as if choreographed. You mutter a quick incantation under your breath, trying to suck the divine energy back into the fruit. Instead, the pomegranate explodes into confetti-like petals that smell strongly of ambrosia and mild panic. "Cool," says a young shepherd nearby, who saw the whole thing. "Is that like a city snack?" You nod slowly. "Very trendy right now." Historians still argue whether singing olives was meant to be literal, or if it referred to a local theatrical troupe in Epirus with elaborate food-based metaphors. You know better. You were there. Those olives had range. You spend the next 10 minutes chasing the musical fruit across the hillside, trying not to draw more attention. A few sheep are humming now. One has started head-bobbing to the beat. That's when Demetrios walks up. He squints at the scene, goat glaring, bees motioning, sheep synchronized, and says, "What in Hades is going on here?" You freeze. Lunch break?" He raises an eyebrow. "Why are the olives dancing?" "They're fermented?" You offer weakly. He sighs long and hard, like a man who's seen too many weird harvests and not enough honest fences. "No more city food. From now on, eat what we give you. Bread. Cheese. Quiet olives. Got it." Later, after the sheep have settled and the olives have been rounded up and buried under a small rock pile, you made a note to revisit them later for potential album deals. You wander down to the river to wash your hands. The water's cool and slow, shaded by reeds and whispering trees. You look into the rippling surface and catch your own reflection. For a moment you see yourself not as a herdsman, not as a humbled worker of the land, but as Apollo, sun god, prophecy bringer, lyre player, occasional disaster machine. And you sigh. It's hard to be ordinary when the universe keeps reacting to you like you're an open flame in a hayloft. Then you hear a rustle. You turn and spot a shepherdess approaching, holding a basket of herbs. You okay? You nod. Just, reflective. She sits beside you and offers a sprig of mint. You're not like the others. You blink. Is that a compliment? Not really. But you don't smell like goats. So that's a start. You grin. Thanks. Also, Brutus hates you. Yeah, I got that. She laughs softly. He hates most people, but he really hates you. You glance toward the hillside where Brutus stands dramatically silhouetted, chewing grass like a villain monologuing to the wind. I think it's mutual, you say. You both sit in silence for a while, watching the water glint and curl around stones. It's peaceful. Grounding. Maybe this hurting thing isn't going too badly. Then, behind you, the olives start singing again. You don't even turn around. You just sigh, mutter, later, and splash your face with water that instantly warms in your divine hands. There's a rule on the farm that nobody writes down, but everyone knows, don't spook the sheep. Apparently, it's hard enough getting them to move in the right direction without divine interventions or full-on panic symphonies. Which is unfortunate because today, you managed to break that rule in spectacular, record-setting fashion. It starts, innocently enough, with your panpipes. You're trying to lay low after the singing olive debacle, which has already become a whispered legend among the younger shepherds, so you sit on a shaded rock at the edge of the field and pull out your panpipes, your favorite, custom-crafted, Midas-tuned set made from reeds plucked beside the river Pactolus. You haven't played them in years, but the familiarity of the instrument soothes you. You purse your lips, blow gently, and let the first few notes drift into the warm air. Big mistake. The sheep freeze mid-graze. Every single one of them. Their little eyes widen. Their ears tilt in unison, like a woolen cult hearing the call of the void. You don't notice at first. You're too into the song. It's an old Arcadian melody, something about gentle rivers and lost lovers. You let your fingers dance, and as you do, the ground vibrates subtly. A butterfly lands on your shoulder and immediately bursts into gold dust. Charming! But then comes the stampede. One sheep bolts. The others follow. You pause, mid-note, pipe still to your lips, and watch as the entire flock tears downhill in a puffball tidal wave. They're bleeding in panic, hooves skittering, wool flying. One jumps an irrigation ditch like an Olympian hurdler. You try to stop. You really do. But it turns out the melody continues itself. The panpipes have caught your divine spark, and now they're playing you. Notes pour from the reeds and swells, deep and trembling, as if the mountains themselves are crying from heartbreak. Shepherds start yelling. Brutus launches into full-on battle stance, trying to headbutt the sound waves. One cow collapses out of sheer emotional overload. You don't blame her. The crescendo hits like a poetic gut punch. You slap the pipes out of your mouth. They don't stop. Pan, wherever he is probably laughing his furry legs off. You tackle the pipes and wrestle them to the ground, stuffing them under your cloak where they finally, fall silent. The silence that follows is thunderous. When you look up, the entire field is empty, except for one sheep, circling in confused, hypnotized loops, like it forgot how physics works. Mainstream historians chalk up this event as a rare meteorological disturbance that frightened livestock across the region. Fringe theorists claim a celestial jazz musician crashed a rural wedding and caused mass sonic confusion. You know the truth, your panpipes are banned. Demetrios trudges up the hill, face the color of overripe tomatoes. What did I say? He grunts. About quiet? You try to smile. It was a lullaby? He stares. You nod. A very passionate lullaby. Fix it, he snaps, pointing toward the horizon, where a dust cloud suggests your sheep may now be halfway to Macedonia. And so, you spend the afternoon chasing sheep. Again. This time, you're careful to hum absolutely nothing. Even your footsteps feel musically dangerous. You find 2 sheep stuck in a thorn bush, and another standing proudly on top of an olive press like it owns the place. You mutter under your breath. This is not what they meant by shepherd of men. There's a point, just before sunset, when you pause by the fence, winded, sweating, yes, sweating, you're trying to keep your glow down, and you hear someone behind you say, "Are you okay?" It's the same shepherdess from the river, now leaning against a post with her arms crossed. You look like you were trying to herd them with interpretive dance. I was, you say, brushing twigs out of your hair. But they didn't understand the third act. She smirks. They usually don't. You both share a laugh. And for a moment, it feels like you belong here. Not just as an undercover god playing farmhand, but as someone learning. Failing. Trying again. Then she adds, though one of the elders says your music made his nose bleed. You blink. That's new. Yeah. He also said he saw his dead wife in the clouds. Also new. You glance at your cloak, where the panpipes still twitch faintly like a haunted flute worm. You decide to bury them tomorrow. That evening, the sheep finally settle. One by one, they wander back into the pen, dusty, tired, but somehow unharmed. The stars come out. The cicadas start their songs, which, blessedly, do not cause hallucinations. You sit by the fire pit with the others. No music tonight. Just the crackle of flames and the occasional comment about the weirdest herd scatterings since that lightning goat incident in '39. You sip warm goat's milk. It's not nectar, but it's calming. Earthy. A few of the younger herders ask about the music. You tell them it was an old lullaby from your mother. Not technically untrue. Leto used to hum those melodies when Zeus wasn't storming around with raincloud tantrums. They seem satisfied. You exhale. You made it through another day. Barely. And somewhere, in the bottom of your bag, the panpipes hum a single note. You ignore it. You know it's going to be one of those days the moment the cow speaks Latin. It starts innocently enough, which, in your case, is always the red flag. You're doing your morning rounds, checking hooves and hay, trying very hard not to shine so brightly that the shadows get scared off the trees. Brutus glares from atop a barrel like some shaggy goat godfather. The sheep shuffle around, avoiding your gaze. A gentle, earthy rhythm hums through the field. And then, from behind you, in a low and surprisingly eloquent voice, Vita brevis, ars longa. You freeze. Slowly, carefully you turn. And there she is, Callista, the gentlest of the farm's 3 cows, chewing thoughtfully and staring at you with world-weary bovine eyes. What? You say. She blinks. Life is short. Art is long. You drop your shepherd's crook. Now, here's the thing. This does fall into your wheelhouse. You're Apollo, patron of poetry, music, medicine, and yes, even the occasional inspirational cow. But this wasn't intentional. You haven't blessed any livestock with divine insight. Not today, anyway. You crouch slowly. Can you say that again? Callista chews for a moment longer. Then, with the solemnity of a marble statue. Tempus fugit. You groan. Time flies. Yeah. I know. You glance around. No one else is nearby. The other cows are grazing like normal cows, not quoting Roman philosophers. The sheep are probably gossiping, but they always do that and bleats too fast to translate. You squint at Callista. Did I do this to you? She shrugs. A literal cow shrug. This is unexpected. Now, historians don't agree on this part. Some claim there were divinely inspired livestock in antiquity, like that prophetic chicken in Thebes or the donkey that refused to enter Delphi unless bribed with pomegranate jam. Fringe scholars even suggest the Trojan horse may have been a metaphor for a highly articulate ox. You, however, are more concerned with how this happened. You didn't enchant, or bless anything. Not that you remember. But yesterday's olives did sing, and now Callista's doing Stoic philosophy. Coincidence? Maybe. You return to your duties slightly rattled. But Callista doesn't stop. Throughout the day, she drops more quotes. Cogito, ergo sum. Et tu, brute? At one point, she stares into the distance and mutters, "The unexamined life is not worth living." You swear she sighs afterward. By lunch, word gets around. She talks? Asks a teen shepherd named Nico, wide-eyed and holding a sketchpad. She quotes. You clarify. Nico immediately tries to get the cow to recite something inspirational. Callista ignores him. A few others come by to listen. Some clap. One offers her an apple. Callista eats it but then mutters, "Memento mori." Everyone leaves in nervous silence. You sit beside her, pulling grass and trying to remember if divine leakage is a thing. It is. Sort of. Usually only in high magic zones. But you're nowhere near Delphi, and you haven't done anything dramatic, unless your lyre accidentally played a spell while humming in your bag. Again. You test a theory. Callista, what is the square root of 16? She blinks. Quatuor. Great. She's not just fluent in Latin, she's doing math. You try to whisper a counter-blessing. A soft lull of divine neutrality, meant to restore her to a more typical cow state. She listens, nods slowly, and then licks your arm with all the subtlety of a theology professor trying to make a point. Later that afternoon, you explain the situation to Demetrios. He stares. The cow speaks Latin? She does. He nods, squinting at the field. And this is a problem? You hesitate. I mean, it's not normal. Demetrios grunts. Neither are you. Fair enough. But then he adds, if she starts charging for lectures, we split the profits. So now you're unintentionally managing the region's first philosophical bovine. Later that night, you walk alone through the fields, stars glimmering overhead. The moon hangs low, full and clear, and the sheep are quiet for once. You sit on a flat rock, the one that doesn't smoke when you sit on it anymore. You breathe deep. The air is cool, finally. A soft shuffle behind you. Callista again. You glance over. Not gonna quote Cicero, are you? She looks up at the stars. Carpe noctem. Seize the night. You echo, then chuckle. You're a poet now? She flicks an ear. Moo. Finally, some normalcy. You lie back, letting the starlight bathe your face. You came here to hide, to simplify, to not be Apollo for a while. But every time you try to be ordinary, the world reminds you, subtly or otherwise, that the sun doesn't just switch off. Still, you think maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe strange cows and talking olives are just the cost of being you, even when you're pretending not to be. You sigh and close your eyes. Tomorrow, you'll deal with whatever weirdness comes next. Tonight? You'll just enjoy the moments. Sorry. That one snuck up on you. By now, you've gotten used to being a little too bright. You've stopped trying to hide it entirely. Muffled divine aura or not, your glow still leaks out like a badly wrapped lantern. But today you learn the real problem with being the actual sun god in a rural herding job isn't the daytime. It's the night. You're on the night watch, a responsibility rotated among the shepherds, and Demetrios, clearly testing your humility, or sanity, assigns you the darkest shift, midnight to dawn. Your task? Keep wolves, poachers, and whatever else might sneak through the fields from getting to the livestock. You nod solemnly. Easy enough. What he didn't anticipate, and neither did you, is that you don't do night. The moment you step into the darkness, your body reacts. Your skin begins to shimmer. The sky gets confused. The stars dim, and a warm orange blush creeps into the eastern horizon as if dawn is tiptoeing in hours too early. You're not trying to summon sunrise, but your very presence seems to nudge time forward like an impatient parent at a checkout line. A sleepy shepherd pokes his head out of the barn. Why is the moon flickering? You glance up. The moon, once a calm and respectable crescent, now pulses with slow disco ball flashes, like it's attending an invisible celestial rave. You squint. The silver glow is refracting through your aura in all the wrong ways. You wave a hand, try to cool it, but the moon shudders and spins slightly in response. Not ideal. You walk the fence line, attempting to cast less light. Birds rustle in trees, thinking it's time to sing. Owls blink in betrayal. A fox trots out from a bush, yawns, sees you glowing like a mythical torch, and just gives up, curling into a grumpy ball behind a rock. You're a one-man sunbeam apocalypse. At some point, the sheep begin milling. Not running, but shuffling anxiously. They don't like the confusion. They're night creatures too, in their own sleepy, flatulent way. One ewe lets out a long, nervous bleat. Another walks straight into the fence. You sigh. Okay. Let's try something new. You take off your cloak and drape it over your shoulders like a curtain, trying to trap the light. You hum softly, not a magic song, just a calming, low tone. The kind you remember your mother using on chilly Delian nights when the stars seemed too quiet. It works. Sort of. The moon stops pulsing. The sky settles. Even the fireflies slow their jittery, panicked flashing. But that's when the predators show up. Well, kind of. 2 wild dogs, scrawny and dust-covered, slink in from the trees. They smell like trouble and look like someone's mythological leftovers. One growls low. The other starts to creep toward the fence. You raise a hand. Just a little glow. Just enough to scare. The result? The entire field floods with a sudden sunrise. Not gradual. Not poetic. Just full, blinding daylight, like you kicked Helios out of his chariot and took the reins yourself. The dogs yelp and flee. Mission accomplished, right? But now everything else wakes up. Birds scream from trees. Sheep start running in confused spirals. A donkey honks like a horn in a horror movie. Brutus the goat leaps over a wall, lands on a haystack, and strikes a pose like he's re-entering Earth's atmosphere. From the village below, a few windows light up. One voice floats faintly over the hillside. It's 3 in the bloody morning. You duck. Historians still argue whether Apollo's accidental dawn was a one-time celestial hiccup or an early sunrise tied to a solar eclipse no one saw coming. Fringe astrologers, as usual, blame Mercury. You, however, spend the next 20 minutes herding panicked sheep and muttering apologies to stars. By the time Demetrios trudges back at sunrise, actual sunrise, you're sitting in the middle of the pasture, covered in hay, cradling a lamb that insists on bleeding in perfect thirds. The sky, exhausted from your earlier misfire, now glows faintly purple. Demetrios surveys the chaos. Hoof prints everywhere, a fence askew, Brutus stuck in a tree, and a donkey with a 1,000-yard stare. He says nothing. You offer a peace gesture. Everyone's safe. He exhales through his nose. You're not allowed to work nights anymore. You nod. That's fair. He turns to go, then adds, What did you do to the moon? You glance at it, still spinning slightly, still blinking faintly like a disco leftover. Improved it? You offer. He walks away. Later, back in your corner of the barn, you hide your face under your straw hat and listen to the animals settling down again. One by one, they return to the rhythms of normality. Chewing, snuffling, quiet bleats. Even Brutus seems too tired to plot your demise for the moment. You stretch out, staring at the rafters. You were supposed to blend in. You were supposed to find quiet. But no matter how hard you try, you are the sun. And tonight? You accidentally fired the night shift. It all starts with a squirrel. Not just any squirrel, a very unlucky one with a knack for dramatic timing and a deep misunderstanding of ballistics. You're feeling unusually optimistic this morning. You've avoided spontaneous fires for 3 days. The sheep haven't bolted. The moon has stopped spinning, mostly. And Demetrios, for once, greeted you with a grunt that didn't sound like he was chewing nails. So naturally, you decide to celebrate, with target practice. Now you know this is risky. The golden bough you carry isn't some peasant's twig and twine, it's forged from celestial light, etched with sun patterns, and strung with solar filament. It was made to slay monsters, not milk jugs. Still, a god's got to keep his edge, right? You wait until your midday break. The others are off dealing with a jammed grain chute or a stubborn mule, or, knowing your luck, a lecture from Callista the Latin cow. You sneak to the far edge of the pasture, where the trees thicken and the air smells of pine and secret regrets. You pick your target, a wooden fence post about 50 paces off. You knock an arrow of pure golden energy, one you conjure carefully, humming under your breath to keep the divine charge low. Nothing lethal. Just enough to feel the string hum and the shot arc. You pull. You breathe. You release. The arrow slices through the air like a comet, right as a squirrel zips across the fence. There's a pop of golden light, a crackle of splinters, a high-pitched, furry scream. Then a blur of smoke and squirrel limbs spiraling through the air like it's auditioning for a Cirque du Soleil routine. You gape. Oh no! The squirrel lands, dazed but alive, in a bucket. A charred bucket. A former bucket. You rush forward, scoop up the stunned rodent, and whisper a healing charm. Its fur stops smoldering. Its eyes regain focus. It slaps you across the face. Fair. Mainstream history doesn't mention divine archery incidents involving woodland creatures. But to be fair, most scrolls burned when you accidentally tested this bow in the royal olive garden of Tiryns back in the day. Historians still argue whether the flaming fig grove was your doing or a rival god's prank. Back at the fence post, the damage is clear. It's splintered in half. There's a smoking crater behind it. And worst of all, you miss the actual post by at least 5 feet. You mutter to yourself, "Should have just practiced with a stick and rock like a normal demigod." You're still trying to repair the fence when Demetrios shows up. "What in Hades happened here?" he says, pointing at the charred ground and the deeply unamused squirrel still glaring from a tree branch. You freeze. "Meteor strike?" Demetrios crosses his arms. "Lightning?" you offer. He walks over and picks something up, one of the arrow shards, still glowing faintly. "This yours?" You sigh. "Okay, yes. I was testing a bow." "You brought a weapon onto my land?" "Not a weapon. More like a divine, precision tool." He holds up the glowing shard. "It blew up a squirrel. He lived." Demetrios pinches the bridge of his nose. "You're supposed to watch the sheep, not turn them into pyrotechnics. The sheep are fine." Behind you, a distant "ba" rings out with the unmistakable tone of something falling into a ditch. You both pause. "I'll go check on that," you mumble. "You'll fix this fence first," he growls. So you do. You roll up your sleeves, suppress your radiance, and do it the mortal way. No divine shortcuts. Just hammer, nails, splinters, and 4 separate injuries to your thumbs. You're halfway through when Brutus wanders by, chews on the arrow shard, then spits it out with a look that says, "Even I think you're reckless." By the time the repairs are finished, your glow is dulled from sweat, and your temper's taken a hit. You stomp back to the barn, where Callista greets you with a solemn moo and the phrase, "Ignorantia legis non excusat." You groan. "Yes, yes. Ignorance of the law is no excuse." She blinks. "Moo." You collapse into a hay pile. Above you, a pair of owls sit in the rafters, watching like tiny judicial clerks. You close your eyes. Today was a mess. You almost created the first airborne squirrel siege, scared half the flock, and got a formal warning from a goat. The truth is setting in now. You're trying so hard to pretend you're not divine. To blend, to belong, to just live. But every attempt you make at control ends with something either catching fire, speaking Latin, or flying through the air. You think of Artemis, your sister, your better half in so many ways. She'd have nailed that shot. Elegant, silent, clean. You, though? Your fire and crash and golden mess. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you don't get to have peace. Still, you're not giving up. Not yet. You whisper to the squirrel, now lurking nearby. "Sorry about the launch." It chitters. You conjure a tiny acorn. Golden, warm, glowing faintly. The squirrel grabs it. Nibbles. then flips you off with its tail. There. You've barely recovered from the squirrel slinging fiasco when the next problem flutters in, literally. It's a lark, bright-feathered and chatty, with an attitude far too large for its wingspan. You're humming as you walk the hillside, trying to avoid breaking anything. The sheep are unusually calm this morning, and Brutus hasn't headbutted you since dawn. Progress. You spot the bird on a fence post ahead, sleek, amber-brown, chirping with all the chaotic confidence of someone who knows they're being watched. You give it a friendly nod. Lovely day. The lark chirps twice, cocks its head, and replies, in clear, piercing hiatic. You think I don't know who you are? You stop mid-step. The lark fluffs its feathers. Apollo, slayer of Python, bringer of plague and song. You think you can just, what, moonlight as a shepherd and no one will notice? Your jaw tightens. Lower your voice. I chirp. I am literally incapable of lowering my voice. You scan the horizon to make sure no humans are in earshot. Why are you here? The bird hops closer. Because, my radiant friend, your vibes are leaking into the local avian network. I've heard sparrows composing hexameter. Pigeons divining crop yields. This entire valley is turning into an opera. You cross your arms. That sounds amazing. It's a disaster. Then, the lark flutters onto your shoulder, eyeing you with the boldness of someone who has definitely yelled at a god before. Look, I don't care what midlife divine crisis you're going through, but stop enchanting every feathered thing in a 5-mile radius. You scoff. You're exaggerating. Am I? Because there's a rooster in the next village quoting Sophocles. You grimace. Okay, that might have been the Moon Knight mishap. Might have? Fringe scholars speculate that animals speaking in classical dialects was often allegorical, reflecting mankind's internal struggle with hubris. You know better. It usually means you accidentally infused a bird with a fraction of your personality while thinking too loudly. You sigh. Fine. What do you want me to do? Undo it. You raise an eyebrow. You want me to unbless you? Yes. That will likely revert your brain to, well, lark level. The bird hesitates, fluttering its wings. Honestly, I think I preferred worms to divine existential dread. There. You lift a hand, murmuring a gentle counter-enchantment. The air around the lark hums, golden and soft, like the end of a very long concert. It blinks, chirps, then stares at you blankly before flying off in silence. You watch it go, feeling oddly hollow. Then you hear a sound behind you, a slow, deliberate ahem. You turn. It's a shepherd you don't know well. He's short, broad, and holding a clipboard that absolutely screams authority. He wears a badge stitched into his tunic, a simple circle with a sheep inside. Official herding guild. Oh no. Name? He asks, already writing. You blink. Apollo. He raises an eyebrow. Surname? Just. Apollo. The man snorts. Of course. He flips through a few pages. We've had some unusual complaints. Your stomach tightens. Such as? Sunburnt livestock. Over-literate poultry. Spontaneous poetry contests involving cows. And, he narrows his eyes, a certain shepherd accused of divine harassment by a songbird. You blink. That's not even a real. Oh, it is. The complaint was filed under mythological workplace interference and avian stress. You have to sit down. I'm afraid, he says, glancing over the top of his clipboard. We'll need to initiate a review. A review? Yes. Of your conduct. Your practices. Your lighting levels. You rub your temples. You can't be serious. The guild is always serious. Fringe scholars claim the herding guild had more political power than early democratic assemblies. You're beginning to believe it. I'm doing my best, you say through gritted teeth. I haven't vaporized anyone all week. Yet your presence continues to cause disturbances. He pauses, tapping his pen. Do you know what happened to the last person who made a crow recite Euripides? You stare. Someone else did that. Yes. They're now managing turnips in Crete. You suppress a shiver. Turnips. The shame. He hands you a parchment. Sign this. Acknowledgement of preliminary review, pending full inspection. You take it. Your signature glows faintly as you write it. He frowns at that but says nothing. As he turns to go, he adds, "Try to be more dim." "Thanks. I'll just unplug myself." He nods. "Good talk." You slump back against a tree. The sky above remains mercifully silent. Even the birds have stopped quoting Aristotle. You were just trying to play it cool. Fit in. Offer some musical enrichment. And now you're facing divine HR over a talkative bird. You glance around, half expecting Hermes to appear and say, "Told you so." But no one comes. Just you. Just the wind. And the lingering echo of that lark's sass. You mutter to yourself, "Maybe I do need a vacation." From your vacation. You've barely digested the fact that you're now under official investigation by the herding guild when the next fiasco trots into your life. Quite literally. A small lamb named Melly, just a few weeks old and soft as whipped cream, has been limping around the pasture. She's precious, shy, and, according to one of the older shepherds, about as durable as wet bread. You've watched her carefully, hoping she'd heal up on her own, but today she stumbles and lets out a bleat so pitiful that even Brutus stops chewing his tin can. So you act. You kneel beside her, one hand hovering over the tender joint in her hind leg. It's just a sprain, probably. But pain is pain, and you can feel it radiating through her like a heat line. You whisper something ancient, something soft, low, and old as the sea foam at Delos. Your palm glows gently. The lamb lets out a surprised little huff, blinks twice, then immediately bounds 3 feet into the air and sprints off at a speed that suggests she might now be part horse. You smile. Then you turn. And see 3 shepherds staring at you. Oh! The tallest of them, Andronikos, a former soldier turned livestock strategist, crosses his arms. What was that? You brush hay off your tunic. Just a bit of muscle encouragement. His eyes narrow. Looked like healing. Very mild. Like chamomile tea. You made that lamb fly. She leaped. There's a difference. He gestures broadly at the fields. We've got rules, Apollo. No sorcery. No divine shortcuts. It messes with the rhythm. You raise an eyebrow. The rhythm? You start healing sheep, and next thing you know, farmers think their whole flock's immortal. We can't have that. It creates expectations. You glance at the now distant Melly, who's cartwheeling over a mound of dirt like a lamb-shaped comet. She's fine. Isn't that the goal? He sighs. You're not listening. This isn't about what you can do. It's about what we're supposed to do. Ah. That old song. Historians still argue whether ancient shepherding guilds enforced such strict codes for practical reasons, or if it was a subtle way of resisting divine influence in rural economies. Either way, you're now caught in a classic philosophical quagmire. Help quietly, or let them limp loudly? That evening, you're summoned to what the locals call the feed room, which sounds cute but functions more like a tribunal when they drag in a barrel and start taking notes. Demetrios is there, arms folded, face like a thundercloud. Andronikos paces like a war general. Callista the Latin-speaking cow stands nearby, probably as a character witness. She offers a low, judgmental moo. We appreciate your enthusiasm. Demetrios starts, but healing without protocol is a breach of the herding code. You fold your arms. She was in pain. And we had it under control. He says firmly. Herbs. Rest. Slathering her in goat butter and rosemary, if needed. You wrinkle your nose. I think I did her a favor. Andronikos slams down a clipboard. You made her too healthy. She tried to race the windmill. She's scaring the other lambs. When you fainted watching her. You bite back a smile. Sounds like inspiration. It's disruption. There's a beat of silence. Then the cow mutters, Primum non nocere. You turn. Are you seriously quoting medical ethics at me now? She moos. You exhale and sit on the grain barrel. Look, I'm not trying to upset the order here. I'm just me. I see pain, I fix it. That's who I am. That's the problem, Demetrios says. You're not one of us. You never were. That stings more than it should. You expected pushback. You didn't expect to feel this, tired. I thought the goal was to protect the herd. You say softly, to care for them. It is, Andronikos says. But we do that together. Even when it's slow. Even when it hurts a little. You nod. You get it. But it still feels wrong to not help. Later, out in the field, you sit beside Melly as she naps in the straw, her breathing deep and even. Her tiny chest rises and falls like she's dreaming of great adventures, of bounding over mountains, outrunning clouds, leaping through sunbeams. You whisper to her, maybe you were born to fly. Behind you, Brutus sneezes. You turn and mutter, not you. And as the stars flicker awake, you can't help but wonder, maybe blending in means not fixing everything. Maybe the hardest part of living like a mortal is learning to let things be a little broken. A little messy. A little human. You lie back in the grass. One sheep curls next to your leg. Far off, a lark chirps, not in Latin this time, but just a simple, honest tune. Maybe you're learning something here after all. You're barely getting used to the idea of not healing every sprained lamb in sight when you wake up to find Brutus, the goat, your arch-nemesis and accidental life coach, standing triumphantly on top of your sleeping mat with a scroll in his mouth. You groan. Brutus, if that's another guild notice, I swear to. He spits it out directly onto your face. You blink the papyrus out of your eye and unroll it. The handwriting is prophetic. Curved. Rhyming. And absolutely unhelpful. Beware the melon of fire. The shoes with teeth. The oracle's choir. What you sow in the dirt, you shall reap beneath. You stare. Then you double-check that you haven't accidentally rolled into Delphi overnight. Nope. Still the same scratchy straw mat. Same rustic air. Same goat, staring at you with smug contempt. You sit up and scan the sky. It's one of those mornings that feel like they're holding their breath, birds too quiet, wind too still. Something is coming. And it smells like sunburned riddles. You tuck the scroll away and head for the one place where you might get answers, the local oracle. Technically, she's retired. Lives in a crooked hut just outside the pasture, half covered in moss and mystery. The sheep refuse to graze near her house. Some say she used to be a dryad. Others whisper she's part harpy. You've only met her once, and she cursed your hair into curls for 3 days after you corrected her grammar. But today, you knock on her door with a respectful humility, the kind that only comes from divine employment probation. The door creaks open on its own. Of course. Inside, it smells like old parchment, time, and freshly extinguished prophecy. The oracle is seated on a large cushion, wrapped in layers of linen, eyes clouded with the kind of wisdom that's half truth, half dramatic effect. You see cancers, she says before you speak. You nod. Someone mailed me a poem. She waves a hand. The future does that sometimes. I'm being fired, you explain. Not by Olympus, by farmers. She chuckles. That's worse. You sit cross-legged across from her. What does the melon of fire mean? She reaches into a nearby basket and pulls out an actual melon. Charred. Smoldering. You squint. How? Prophecy is a full-contact sport, she says deadpan. You press on. And the shoes with teeth? She gestures at your feet. You look down. Your sandals have grown teeth. You yelp and fling them off. They skitter into the corner, snapping at each other like tiny, leather piranhas. The oracle shrugs. Symbolic. Of what? She shrugs again. Possibly your misplaced ego. Possibly just bad footwear karma. You pinch the bridge of your nose. I'm trying to fit in. I've followed the rules, sort of. I've tried not to shine, not to heal, not to sing. And yet every day, something else goes wrong. She leans in, cloudy eyes sharpening. Because you are not meant to shrink. You are the sun. And the sun, dear Apollo, does not dim. It burns. It grows. It insists. You frown. So I'm doomed to get fired? Maybe, she says, sipping something that smells like tea in regret. Maybe not. But your mistake wasn't glowing. Your mistake was apologizing for it. You blink. That one hits deep. Historians still argue whether oracles delivered true insight or just weaponized metaphors. You're beginning to think it's both. She sets down her tea and gestures to the scroll you brought. You fear being dismissed. But endings are just hidden doorways. Look again. You unroll the poem once more. And now, as your divine vision sharpens, the words shimmer, each rhyme splitting open to reveal another layer, another message. It's not a warning. It's a map. You thank her, sincerely, and back out the door, barefoot and rattled. Your sandals are still chewing each other behind her curtain. That's fine. You'll walk home the old way. Along the way, you stop to pet a dog that immediately gains 3 IQ points, apologize to a tree you once accidentally enchanted, and notice the clouds seem to follow your pace, gently, respectfully. At the barn, Demetrios is waiting. Arms folded. Eyes tired. You went to the oracle, he says flatly. You nod. She tried to feed me a metaphorical turnip. And? She thinks I should stop apologizing for being a walking solar event. He grunts. Can't argue with that. You both stare at the pasture. Sheep are chewing peacefully. Brutus is perched on a barrel, having a philosophical staring match with Callista. One of the chickens is performing what might be interpretive dance. You sigh. I don't want to ruin this place. Demetrios scratches his beard. Then stop trying to be something you're not. Just be you. But less explodey. You laugh. I can try. You go to retrieve new sandals, plain ones. Non-carnivorous. But in your pocket you keep the poem. The melon. The memory of the oracle's words. Because something's shifting. And the fire under your skin? It's ready. You'd think that after moonlight raves, goat vendettas, and enchanted fruit concerts you'd have seen it all. And then Apollo, the literal sun god, destroyer of serpents, source of light and oddly decent at embroidery, decides to host a pasture poetry slam. It starts innocently, as always. You're on your break, sitting in your usual shady spot under the fig tree, just you, a scribbled papyrus, and a half-eaten plum. The lambs are dozing in clumps, Brutus is plotting in the distance, you can tell by the way he keeps headbutting a stump with increasing intensity, and you're feeling inspired. You write a haiku. Golden fleece glimmers. Dust dances in morning light. Sheep fart in silence. Art. You smile to yourself, then read it aloud, softly. One nearby you raises her head. Another sheep waggles an ear, clearly intrigued. You're joking, of course, until a third sheep takes a slow, deliberate step closer. And bleats in iambic pentameter. You freeze. Did you just? The sheep bleats again. 5 metric feet. Perfect Shakespearean rhythm. You sit up straighter. Do it again. Another bleat. Another verse. Somewhere behind you, Callista mutters something in Latin that sounds suspiciously like, "Here we go again." And just like that, you have an audience. The cows gather. The goats shuffle forward. Even Brutus abandons his war post and lumbers over with the solemnity of a furry judge. You set a rock down like a makeshift stage and declare, without irony, "Welcome to the first annual herd slam." The sheep go first, bleating rhymes that touch on everything from existential loneliness. Why does the grass stop at the fence? To barn romance? I loved you once by the hay bale, you smelly brute. Then the cows take the stage, their deep voices turning pastoral observation into meditative sonnets. Callista drops a limerick about your cooking that's honestly brutal. Brutus performs a minimalist performance piece that's just him glaring at you for 30 seconds while chewing dramatically. The audience gives him a standing ovation. It spirals from there. You, naturally, get caught up in it. You recite some old Delphic verses, nothing too dangerous, just the kind of thing that makes the wind sigh and the clouds part respectfully. The sheep go wild. One faints mid-haiku. A local shepherd wanders by, takes one look at the scene, a goat with stage presence, a sheep rhyming about wool anxiety, and a cow wearing a wreath of daisies, and just keeps walking without comment. Wise. Now, fringe scholars have long debated whether livestock in ancient Greece were ever capable of organized creative expression. Some point to obscure vase etchings that depict animals gathered in symmetrical rows under a lyre. Others dismiss this as symbolic. But tonight you've got proof. And it's holding a banana leaf and rhyming about soil quality. You decide to name the event Woolstock. By twilight, the entire barnyard is involved. Even the chickens, who mostly just squawk aggressively in rhythm, seem to understand the vibe. You craft a quick set of clay medals, sun-etched, of course, and award Best Dramatic Monologue to a sheep named Cleo who managed to rhyme fodder with inner slaughter. You're just about to call it a night when you notice the clouds gathering. Not the poetic kind, real ones. Bruised, purple-gray, spiraling unnaturally. And in the middle of the pasture, a hush falls. A figure appears at the edge of the property, tall, windswept, radiating just enough static to make your hair rise. Oh. She's got storm in her eyes, lightning in her veins, and a very familiar scowl. It's her. Thalia. Weather nymph. Lightning sprite. Tempest with legs. And, as of 2 weeks ago, your sort of girlfriend. Sort of. You wince. Oh no. The animals scatter as she strides across the field, boots crackling with ozone, storm clouds circling her head like an angry halo. She stops in front of you, hands on hips. A poetry slam? You smile weakly. It was a spontaneous ovine expression festival. She raises an eyebrow. So this is what you do instead of returning my last 4 thundergrams? You hold up a medal. Want to judge the final round? She stares. Then slowly raises one hand. A bolt of lightning arcs into the ground beside you, narrowly missing your new sandals, which thankfully have no teeth. I'll take that as a no, you say. She glares. You ghosted me for sheep sonnets. In my defense, one of them did rhyme wool with existential drool. That's talent. She huffs, but her lip quirks. Just a little. The storm quiets, slightly. You reach out, gently take her hand, and the electric charge dims to a low buzz. You lean in. You want to read something? Maybe open mic? She rolls her eyes, but doesn't pull away. You're an idiot. You grin. But a glowing one. She sighs. Fine. 1 verse. Then we talk. You clap your hands, and the animals gather again, braver now, some wearing tufts of moss like laurels. You clear the stone stage for her. She steps up, breathes deep, and recites a soft, surprising poem about sky loneliness and how clouds sometimes wish they could hug mountains. There's silence. Then roaring applause. Even Brutus bleats politely. As the stars prick the sky and the night folds gently around the pasture, you sit side by side on the grass, listening to the sheep sing lullabies. This wasn't what you planned. But for one glorious, weird night? It works. You should have known the poetry piece couldn't last. It starts the very next morning, no soft breeze, no golden glow, just thunder. And not the pretty cinematic kind. This is the petty, heartbroken, someone's about to drown your farm kind of thunder. You groan before you're even fully awake. Your hut smells faintly of damp hay and regret. Brutus is missing, which is always ominous. Callista's mooing somewhere out back in what sounds like iambic pentameter again, which would be fine if she weren't doing it at 5:47 a.m. You rub your eyes. Then you hear it. Rain. Not gentle. Not apologetic. No pitter-patter. This is dramatic rain. This is... A storm nymph is angry. Rain. You pull on your cloak, now somewhat flame-resistant thanks to a blessing you whispered into it last week, and step outside. The sky is a wet gray monster, low-hanging and boiling like Poseidon, had an allergic reaction. A torrent pounds the pasture. The sheep are all pressed into a tight soggy clump beneath the fig trees, glaring at you like you did this. Brutus stands on top of a rock with his face to the heavens, looking smug. You squint toward the edge of the storm and see her. Thalia. Your storm nymph. Your accidental heartbreak. Your X-ish tempest. She stands with arms crossed, barefoot in a puddle that doesn't dare soak her. Her hair is practically floating with static. The air smells like lavender and angry ozone. You trudge toward her, water soaking your boots instantly. Good morning, you offer. She frowns. You didn't say goodbye. You wince. I left a poem. And a wreath. And a goat-shaped cookie. It rained inside my tree for 3 days. You sigh. That part was not intentional. She narrows her eyes. You're not built for subtlety, Apollo. You're built for fanfare and golden doorways and tragic overreactions. And you left. You nod slowly. I was trying to be mortal. Quiet. She gestures wildly to the pasture. Does this look quiet? A bolt of lightning zips sideways across the sky. A nearby bush catches fire, then immediately gets doused by rain. Okay, fair, you say. She steps closer. Her voice softens. You came here to escape Olympus. But you can't escape yourself. You look down. Your reflection in a puddle is glowing slightly even now. Historians rarely comment on the personal lives of storm nymphs, but fringe romantics suggest they were some of the most emotionally volatile entities in myth, capable of conjuring tempests when jilted and, in one case, sinking an entire fishing village over a missed dinner date. You take her hand gently. I didn't mean to hurt you, you say. But I needed to see if I could just be. Without prophecy. Without worship. Without. Me? She finishes. No, you say quietly. Without performance. There's a long pause. Then she snorts. Well, you're failing spectacularly. You smile, rain dripping down your cheeks. You always know how to make me feel small in the exact right way. She raises a brow. And yet, somehow, you're still sunburning your sheep. Speaking of which, there's a flash of wool from the field. Melly, the lamb you healed earlier, has somehow escaped the clump and is now bounding toward the orchard, completely ignoring the mudslide forming behind her. You break into a sprint, calling out, but the rain drowns your voice. Thalia sighs, mutters something into her wrist, and suddenly the air snaps into clarity. The rain pauses just long enough for your voice to cut through. Melly! She freezes. You scoop her up just as the sky resumes its tantrum. A branch crashes down behind you, but Thalia redirects it with a flick of her wrist. Lightning obeys her. You forgot how graceful she is when she's angry. Back under the fig tree, you wrap Melly in your cloak. The other sheep grumble but make room. Thalia stands beside you, arms folded, less thunder now, more mist. You glance up. Still mad? Yes, she says. But less murderously. That's something. I can't keep chasing a god who forgets how bright he is. I didn't forget, you say. I just didn't think it was welcome anymore. She stares at you. It's not about welcome. It's about owning it. She turns to leave, her feet barely touching the wet ground. Then she stops. Rain ends, she says. Eventually. And just like that, she's gone. The clouds lighten. The wind exhales. The rain becomes a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a frog starts singing something suspiciously close to a ballad. You exhale. Brutus gives you a long, unimpressed look. Then sneezes. The sheep begin to uncurl. Callista mutters something snarky in Greek. The chickens emerge from a barrel. Life, somehow, trudges on. You wipe your face, sit down, and pull out your journal. Today's entry reads, She came in thunder. I stood in mud with my truth. She left with the storm. It's not your best. But it's honest. And for now, that's enough. It starts with a B. Just one. A little fellow with fluff on his legs and a mild aggression to his flight pattern. He buzzes around your head at dawn, just as you're stepping out into the field with a tentative sense of optimism and your now mostly defanged sandals. You wave the bee away gently. He returns. You wave again. This time, he bumps your nose. All right, you mutter. Message received. But the message is only beginning. Because 2 hours later, there's an entire swarm. A slow-moving, oddly synchronized, deeply judgmental swarm. They gather on the edge of the pasture like a fuzzy, humming jury. And they are not pleased. It takes you a while to realize what's happening. The sheep are tense. The goats are hiding in the shed. Even Callista looks up from chewing her ancient tome and says, Apis irati sunt. The bees are angry. You follow the swarm's slow orbit until you reach the edge of the sunflower patch. Or rather, the formerly sunflower patch. What remains is a field of brittle stalks and curled petals, scorched under your overly radiant optimism walk from 3 days ago. You squint. Oh. Demetrios arrives just in time to see you attempting to talk down the bees. They don't reason, Apollo, he says flatly, arms folded. They unionize. And oh, do they. By noon, the bees have officially set up a rotating picket formation around the barn. They're carrying tiny wax placards. One says, Too bright to pollinate. Another simply buzzes shame at you every time you walk past. You try to appease them. You offer fresh wildflowers. They melt. You conjure nectar in little golden jars. The bees inspect it like high-level sommeliers and collectively reject it. Finally, a massive queen bee, twice the size of your hand and wearing what you swear is a tiny crown made of clover, descends. She hovers in front of you, wings vibrating with authority. I apologize, you say, bowing slightly. The sun was unintentional. She circles you once, then zips over to a hay bale where she begins rapidly constructing what appears to be a formal declaration of intent. Bees land one by one, forming letters with their tiny bodies. You squint to read it. Effective immediately, pollination services suspended. Demands ambient light reductions by 43%. No more solar humming before 10 a.m. Weekly honey tribute, 1 amphora. Immediate restoration of sunflower groves. You sigh. Fair. Demetrios claps you on the shoulder. You've officially been sanctioned by insects. Better than the guild. You mutter. Mainstream historians never mention apian labor disputes in classical times. But fringe scholars claim the Temple of Artemis once lost an entire crop of sacred lavender when a swarm went on strike after being overblessed. You're starting to believe it. You immediately get to work. Not with magic, no. You've learned your lesson. You plant seeds by hand. You hum softly to the soil, just enough to warm it. You ask the sheep to stop walking over the sprouts. They don't listen, but Melly tries her best to redirect them, and that's close enough. The next morning, a few bees return to inspect. They circle the patch. Sniff. One even lands on your arm, wiggles slightly, then buzzes off without stinging. That's basically an endorsement. But then comes the farmer delegation. It's mid-afternoon, and you're just sitting on a rock, basking in a non-destructive glow, when 3 farmers arrive at the gate. They're clean, serious, and accompanied by a young scribe with suspiciously smooth hands. Demetrios intercepts them, but you can hear the conversation from 50 paces. Too much light, one says. Ruined my turnips, says another. And the bees unionized, adds the third. Demetrios sighs deeply, then gestures toward you. You sit up straighter. The 3 approach. God, the first one says bluntly. You raise a hand. Technically, yes. We want our crops back. I'm working on it. You're a fire hazard. Only if I sneeze too hard. Also, the third says, flipping through a list, a cow in the next village is quoting Heraclitus and spooking the children. You blink. That one's not mine. They stare. Okay, it might be mine. The scribe steps forward. We're submitting a formal request for your resignation. You stare at the scroll he offers you. It's neatly written, wax sealed, glowing faintly with bureaucratic smugness. Resignation? You ask? From pastoral duties, the scribe clarifies. Not from, existence. Just, please stop pretending to be mortal. You look down at your hands, blistered from digging, warm from internal sunlight, still smudged with pollen. I've made mistakes, you admit. Many, the scribe notes. But I've also tried. We see that, the lead farmer says. But trying doesn't unscorch my barley. You sigh. There's a long pause. Finally, you take the scroll, sign your name, one golden, radiant signature that curls slightly at the edges, and hand it back. The scribe bows. The delegation departs. And you are officially fired. Again. Back at the pasture, Brutus snorts. Callista offers a dignified moo. Melly trots up to you and licks your hand. The bees form a loose heart shape in the sky. You sit. Then lie back in the grass, staring up at the one place no one can evict you from. The sun. Still there. Still shining. Still, you. Getting fired is supposed to feel humiliating. But for you, it feels theatrical. Maybe it's the way you left your signature glowing like a comet's tail across that parchment. Maybe it's the dramatic way the wind picked up right as you handed the scroll back, ruffling your hair just enough to make you look poetically tragic. Or maybe it's because the sheep actually booed, not in protest of your behavior, but in protest of your departure. Even Brutus gave you a respectful nod. Then immediately head but a fence post to reassert dominance. The sun's dipping low now, casting gold over everything. You pack your things slowly, which isn't much, your panpipes, still humming faintly despite their demotion, a slightly burnt water flask, the non-aggressive sandals, and a collection of haiku scribbled on hay scraps. Callista approaches as you're slinging your bag over one shoulder. She clears her throat. Finest coronet opus. You nod. The end crowns the work. She lowers her head in a rare, solemn gesture. Then burps. You smile. That's fair. Word has spread. You can feel it in the stillness. The wind holds its breath. The sheep stand in weirdly perfect rows, like they're about to sing a farewell chorus. One chicken lays an egg on cue. It's all a bit much. You step into the center of the pasture, unsure whether to say something profound or just nod and leave. You settle on lifting your hands, glowing just enough to warm the surrounding grass, and whispering a final blessing over the field. Quiet. Honest. No magic tricks. No flaming olives. Just gratitude. Then you turn. Only to hear a voice from behind. You forgot this, says Demetrios. You turn, surprised. He's holding your shepherd's staff. The one you accidentally cracked in half on day one. He's fixed it. Wrapped the splintered spot in leather. Smoothed the handle. You blink. You're giving this back? He shrugs. Didn't say I was giving it. Just, you left it leaning on my fence. You take it gently. Listen, he says, not quite looking at you. You caused more chaos than 10 plagues and a liar competition. But you did care. You showed up. You tried. You nod, unsure what to say. And I don't know what gods are supposed to do when they're not being worshipped. But maybe you don't have to stop shining. Maybe you just need to aim it better. You smile. I'll take that under divine advisement. Then, in the distance, someone shouts, He's leaving! And a sheep breaks into a full gallop, leading a dramatic woolly procession straight toward you. Oh, you mutter. They swarm. Not aggressively, just enthusiastically. You're engulfed in fluff. Melly licks your ear. Brutus charges past like he's leading a victory parade. One goat attempts a standing ovation but collapses halfway up a log. And Callista begins reciting Homer in her deep, cow-accented baritone. You throw your arms up laughing. All right. That's enough. But it's not enough. Not for them. Because apparently you've become the shepherd. Not the best. Not the quietest. Definitely not the most rules compliant. But the one who listened. Who sang. who got sunburnt in solidarity, and who, despite getting fired, never once abandoned them when it counted. Someone starts chanting. You can't tell if it's a shepherd or a goat. But soon the whole field is echoing with something oddly like applause. So you do the only thing that feels right. You raise your hands. You spin slowly, just once, and let a ripple of sunlight wash across the hills. Warm. Not overwhelming. Just enough to light the olive trees and turn the sheep into golden clouds. The sky sings back. A soft, wordless harmony. And somewhere high above, Olympus watches silently. Historians never wrote about this part. There's no myth of Apollo's farewell tour of Thessaly. No epic carved into marble about the god who got fired, hugged a goat, and learned to shine smaller. But maybe that's okay. Maybe this story isn't one for temples. Maybe it's for barn walls and pasture songs and sheep who still remember the warmth of your voice at dawn. As you finally reach the gate, staff in hand, pack slung over your shoulder, you pause and glance back. Not one animal has moved. Even the chickens are still. You give them a wink. Try not to unionize without me. Then you walk away. And behind you, a sheep bleats. Twice. In perfect rhyme. You don't get far before the clouds catch up with you. Not storm clouds, those left with Thalia, along with most of the barnyard drama, but the softer kind. The ones that drift like sleep itself, slow and weightless, nudging your shoulder as if to say, time to let it go now. The road away from the pasture curves uphill, tracing the spine of the land like a final punctuation mark. Your sandals, non-aggressive and blessedly silent, press into the dirt with every step, and the sound of the sheep bleating behind you fades to a low hum, like the ending note of a lullaby. You pause near the top of the ridge. From here, you can see it all. The pastures you singed, the fig tree you accidentally made self-aware for 45 minutes, the barn where Callista still lectures in passive-aggressive Latin. The crooked fence post you split with your sunbeam bough is still there, now wrapped in ivy like the land forgave you before the people did. You turn back, half expecting one last protest, a sheep sit-in, or Brutus performing an interpretive farewell, but the hillside is calm. It's over. You've been fired. Not in rage, not in shame, but in a blaze of accidental affection. The way only a god can be fired, with a spontaneous ovation from goats, and a weather nymph's poetic exit. You walk on. Up ahead is the old trail toward Olympus. It's quieter than you remember. Less echo, more space. No thunderbolts, no divine summons in scroll form. Just the wind. Your staff taps softly with each step, its patched grip warm in your hand. And then you hear it. Singing. Not loud. Not celestial. Just real. A mortal voice. Somewhere nearby, a child is humming the melody you once played on your lyre beside the pasture. The tune you thought lost in a goat stampede, picked up now like a feather on the breeze. You smile. Historians still argue whether gods can truly learn from mortals, or whether it's just a form of divine roleplay with better costumes. You know better. You learned. You tried. You failed spectacularly. And still, somewhere in the grass, someone is humming your melody. That's not failure. That's legacy. You find a large, flat stone and sit. The sky above is soft with clouds that look like melted marble, and your glow has dulled to a mere glint on your fingertips. You take out your lyre. Just once more, you think. You play. Not to impress. Not to summon bees or burn fig trees or cause seismic prophecy-laced livestock seizures. You play for the rhythm of things. The beat of hooves. The whisper of goats plodding. The gentle percussion of olive leaves shifting in the wind. And as the sun finally lowers itself behind the hills, you do something you rarely do. You stop being the sun. You let it go. The road bends gently now, not sharply, softened by time, dust, and your own steps moving steadily away from chaos. The warmth of the pasture remains behind you like the echo of a fire, not in heat, but in comfort. Each breath now feels deeper, each sound more distant, as though the world is tucking itself under a blanket of dusk. The last traces of divine light you carry slip into the folds of twilight, dissolving like honey into warm tea. The fields blur, not with speed, but with peace, each olive tree, each fence post, each stone you once scorched or stumbled over now fading into a seamless backdrop of memory. Up above, stars peek out slowly, timid and unassuming. You've spent eternity watching them, commanding them, ignoring them. But tonight they feel new. Fragile. Kind. The lyre rests quiet in your lap now. Your staff leans beside you. And you? You simply sit, neither radiant nor forgotten, just there, in a moment that asks nothing and offers everything. The sheep will sleep. The bees will buzz. Brutus will plot. And you? You'll close your eyes, knowing that for once, you're not a god trying to be mortal. You're just Apollo, resting in the hush of your own quiet myth. Let the night stretch long. Let your breath slow. You're not glowing now. You're just here. And here is enough.